Hello friends and welcome to my channel. In today's video we have a terrible heartbreaking story about OP who lost her best friend and an entitled Karen who tried to take most valuable thing from OP. Subscribe if you haven't and I hope you'll enjoy it. So I'm a type 1 diabetic and in the morning I went out for a bike ride. As I'm a diabetic, I always bring snacks with me in case I go low or get hungry. I bring a juice box, a few glucose tablets, 2 fruit chew bars and 2 granola bars, just enough for me to be able to correct my blood sugar twice and have a small snack. As I was biking home, I passed someone sitting on the ground who looked like they were kinda distressed, so I pulled over to ask if they were okay. The guy was a little younger than me and told me he was a diabetic and showed me his medical art necklace. He explained that he had gone low while biking, but forgot to refill the snacks in his bag when he had left, so he was trying to figure out what to do, no one to bring him anything, but didn't want to call an ambulance over this. I offered him my snacks and to sit with him while we waited for it to go back up, explaining that I was a diabetic. After I had sat down with him and gave him the tablets, a woman came over and asked for my juice box for her daughter. I explained that I was giving him what I had because he was a diabetic and had low blood sugar, and I needed the rest to ensure I could get home safe. She started to tell me that she and her daughter had been biking for a few hours, and she was hungry and just wanted my juice box and a granola bar. I asked if her daughter was diabetic and she said no, so I apologized and again explained nicely that I need those for myself. The conversation that followed is as such. So why did you give him some? Because he is a diabetic and his blood sugar is very low. For reference, our blood sugar is supposed to be between 4 or 8 and his was 2.3. Do you know him? No, but as a diabetic I know how dangerous lows can be, and if I was in his position, I'd hope a fellow diabetic would try to help me. So you don't know him? The conversation continued like that, she asking why I cared if I didn't know him and me giving the same explanation, until the guy rechecked his blood sugar and it was back up to 3.5. As this was still a little too low for both of us to feel comfortable, I grabbed my juice to give to him, and this is when EM tried to grab it out of my hand, saying that if his blood sugar was still low, I should just call him ambulance, and then I could give my snacks to her and her daughter. At this point I was honestly kinda pissed and told her to back off and that as mom, she should have thought to brought snacks for her daughter and if I hadn't gone by what would she have done. She went red in the face, called me a witch and stormed back to her daughter. The guy's levels went up and we parted ways and as I started to bike away I heard mom shout after me, calling me a witch again. My God, I wonder how people and especially parents can be so self-centered because this guy really could be in serious troubles. I take a while to get to the EP story in this, but the backstory is important. I met my best friend, we'll call her Janice, on the second day of band class in middle school. We were assigned rotating seats for the first week to allow us to get to know all the other students in the class, and Janice and I were assigned the first 2 seats in the back row. This allowed us to get away with more tomfoolery than would normally be allowed. We immediately hit it off and our friendship was only strengthened by our mutual love for playing the trumpet. Let me preface this by saying that Janice was just an incredible person. She was one of those people that even though she had a rough childhood and she was often living day to day not knowing where her next meal was coming from, she never batted an eye and still put other people before herself. I put the pieces together one day when she came into class in dirty clothes and you could tell that she hadn't bathed in a while. I told my mother about it and she decided to open our home to her whenever she wanted to come by. Even though we had no problem with her staying, she rarely ate meals with because she felt shameful for having to rely on my family for those things. After a while her mother was arrested for a reason that I to this day have not been made aware of and she was placed in a foster program. I tried to convince my mother to adopt her into the family, but due to a recent divorce and a hit the economy took my single mother couldn't sustain another person in the household. Eventually a suitable foster parent was found for her and everything seemed to be looking up. Oh, did I forget to mention that her foster family was completely loaded, and I mean loaded, you would never know by the way they acted or lived, but her foster mother developed a software company and sold it to a larger company for a ridiculous amount of money. That out of the way, it was now the end of 7th grade year and we were having our first major tryout to receive our placement in the advanced 8th grade band. We both realized our passion for playing the instrument and music that spring as we practiced for hours on end nearly every day together and both achieved the top scores in the section, earning her the first chair position and me the second chair. We were enthralled and invigorated even more with this passion for music. We continued our rigorous practice routine throughout the summer, and Janice's foster parents paid for the two of us to have private lessons from the trumpet professor at the university in the nearby city. But this training we auditioned for the middle school version of All East and once again both got the first two chairs. At this point both of our families began to invest in us by helping us purchase professional instruments for ourselves. My mother and I split the cost of a professional line Yamaha horn. By this point I had saved up about $1,000 from previous birthdays and holidays, and the other $1,500 was split between my mother and grandparents as a gift. Janice did the same, but had saved up $1,500 over the past several years that she had planned on using for college, but I convinced her that investing it in herself could ultimately end up paying more in the end in scholarships. She eventually got on board and talked with her parents about the trumpet that she wanted to buy within her price range. They reached out to me and told me that they wanted to surprise her with a much better trumpet than she was expecting. I let them know where to look, and with some clever work from my side and theirs, we gathered all the information that we needed, and they put in the order. A few months later I got a phone call from her. At first I was scared because she was sobbing directly into the phone, and I couldn't understand her. Eventually she calmed down enough to tell me that her new trumpet had come in, but it wasn't the one that she was expecting, and that I needed to come over right now. I thought I knew what I was going to see when I walked in, but to my utter surprise it was nothing like I had expected. When I gave her parents the details and specs of her ideal trumpet, I figured that they were going to find one that was very similar in spec and get it for her, but they actually got her a completely custom trumpet to the exact spec that she had wanted and had it plated in a beautiful brushed silver finish with lapis inlet in the valve finger buttons. It was beyond gorgeous and played like a dream. Here's where all hell breaks loose and one of the most unfortunate series of events unfolds. A few years down the road and we are both auditioning for the high school version of All East for our state as freshmen. If we place in the top section in the top band, we get an invite to audition for All State, which is a huge honor to be a part of. I remember standing outside of the door waiting for Janice to get out of her audition when I was approached by another trumpet player standing in line, followed closely by EP, entitled Parents. "Your friend has a very beautiful trumpet," said the kid. "Do you think she would let me play a few notes on it when she is finished?" I already knew the answer as she frequently got asked this at these types of events. "I'm sorry, but she doesn't let other people play it because it was a gift to her and she doesn't want to risk getting it damaged." I saw the dismay in his eyes and the disbelief in his parents, so I quickly remedied the situation. "She would definitely let you have a good look at it though. We love talking to other people who are interested in different types of trumpets." This seemed to diffuse the situation, and we met with him afterwards and had a quite pleasant experience because he was very knowledgeable on the subject, and so were we. We got the results for his auditions a few days later, and I was incredibly surprised as I got second chair and Janice got fourth. This was incredibly unusual as she was clearly the better player of the two of us, but I thought nothing of it. We both qualified for all state auditions, and that is all that mattered. A week passes and we are on our way to the all-state auditions. My parents drove separate and I rode with Janice. She went into kindergarten a year late and had a late birthday, thus had her license as a freshman. We arrive and meet the same kid and EPs in the parking lot. We have a slightly more awkward encounter, but again I think nothing of it and just blame it on the nerves. We go into the auditions and both do wonderful. At night we get the call and they told us that she got first chair and I got third. That was an incredible moment, and that night we stayed up on the phone planning our future as performing artists that would travel the globe and wow people with our wonderful trumpet playing. The next morning, we hurried over to the practice hall to get an early warm-up. The rehearsal went astoundingly well, and Janice had one of the most beautiful solos I had ever heard in a ballad-type piece we played. The next morning during practice we had a lunch break, and while Janice was getting out of her seat, she tripped on a bottle of valve oil and landed trumpet first into the ground. I immediately rushed over to make sure she was okay, but she had hit her head on the side of a stand and put a serious dent in the bell of her trumpet. She began to fall apart because she felt she had let her foster parents down by damaging the gift that they had given her. She sprung up after a few seconds, and the shock began to settle. She asked if I could hold on to the trumpet while she went to the bathroom to clean out the cut she got from the stand. A few hours passed and I hadn't heard anything from her. I continued to call her number but got nothing. I began to worry when I got a phone call from my parents. I could hear sirens in the background and my mother was crying. She told me to meet them out front and that they would pick me up and take me back to the hotel. I felt sick in my stomach and had an overwhelming feeling of dread. I continued to look for Janice while waiting on my parents. I wanted to let her know what was going on and talk to her about what had happened as she was clearly upset. As my parents pulled into the parking lot, I got into the car and they drove to a spot near the back and turned the car off. I asked what was going on and my mom explained to me that Janice was driving back to the hotel and ran a red light. She was T-boned by a truck and was killed in the crash. I had no words. I still have no words. I just sat there clutching the scratched and dented trumpet in my arms with tears rolling down my face. It hadn't set in yet, I couldn't believe it. I remember it vividly as it seemed that subconsciously I was processing the news, but emotionally I wasn't allowing myself to. My tears were not accompanied by anything, no emotion, just a feeling of void. I even lashed out at my parents accusing them of a cruel joke, but it was true. My best friend, whom I considered my sister, was gone just like that. No goodbye, nothing, that was it. 2 weeks came and went, and the postponed all-state concert was approaching. We had a ceremony at the first practice for her, but by this point I had attempted to numb myself to avoid dealing with the loss, so I didn't participate. I brought her trumpet with me to practice one day, because for some reason it brought me comfort to have it near. It was set up on its stand next to me when I was once again approached by EP. She asked me what happened to the trumpet, to which I replied she tripped while she was carrying it and dinged it up really bad. She then asked me politely if her son could play it now that it was damaged. No, she trusted me with it and I have to keep it safe. I replied. Oh come on. She fired back. Just for one song. I'm sorry but I can't do that. I said, slightly agitated at this point. Are you serious? She started yelling now. All my son wants to do is to play your stupid friend's beat-up trumpet and you won't even let him touch it. He got to hold it before, why can't he play it now? I was taken aback by this whole scenario and just stood there with my mouth agape. But she continued. Can you believe this, addressing the few kids left in the room. This boy thinks that he is so much better than my son that he won't even let him use his dead girlfriend's trumpet. At this point I am fuming. I start to retort, but I don't get far before I get too choked up to keep talking. Why on earth do you need to keep it safe anyway? It's not like she is going to need it anytime soon. The least you can do is make my son happy by giving him her trumpet. He can play it better than she could anyway. My emotional barriers that I had put up to control my feelings at that time were completely overwhelmed and began to sob. She reached over me and attempted to grab the trumpet when the director walked back in the room and saw what was going on. He hurried over to where we were, but EP scurried out of the building before he could get to her. He immediately called the police. By this point the emotional dam I had built had busted, and all I could do to comfort me was to keep her trumpet in my lap as I wailed and sobbed. I had a full breakdown and didn't stop for nearly an hour after my parents came and got me. The concert was cancelled, and EP and Child were never allowed to participate in all-state performances again, and I received no confirmation of this, but I have been told that he was kicked out of his high school band program. We were encouraged to press charges against her, but I refused because I didn't want any more emotional weight at the time and figured that it was some sort of moral high road. Looking back, I almost wish I had pressed charges. Anyone who would have the audacity to do something like that, to a child mind you, needed some serious help, and I think that would have been a good wake-up call. To end on a more positive note, I have continued to pursue our passion and perform music across the country, and since that day I have performed every gig and concert, etc. on her trumpet exactly how she left it. It still gives me comfort to have it near. It's as if a bit of her is still with me when I have it. I hope you enjoyed this marvelous story from my childhood. I apologize for the length, but I felt that the full context of the story was needed. And I feel that it is important to address that this happened a long time ago, and my memory may have lost a little on the details, but I tried to keep it to what was most solid in my memory. I appreciate the read and hope every one of you is doing well. This is probably the most touching and heart-catching story I've heard in a while. I hope OP is fine now and moving on. So what happened is my mom told me to clean out my cupboard where I keep my books and stationery, and I missed a refill wrapper in the cupboard, and she started insulting me for how ignorant I was. How shameless, unclean, and disrespectful child I was, even though I do all the cleaning chores in the house every single freaking day. Then came the time when she had to start making dinner. And she started off by telling me, prove me that you're not lazy, cook your freaking dinner. Now I don't know how to cook. The best I can do myself right now is instant noodles and other instant foods. I know that's not much for a 16-year-old, now there wasn't any at the time, so I told her that and she replied with, "Oh, only if my son had the brains to learn to cook his own food." To which I replied immediately, and I agree was wrong, but she insulted me multiple times before this. Well, I am your son after all, I didn't choose to be so, and she went out bawling at me, shouting and screaming about how I'm being disrespectful and speaking too much for my age, and my dad got involved and he started shouting at me too. Now mom said that she won't make dinner, my dad told me that I can't order in food, I don't have anything to eat, and now I'm pissed off. Thanks for listening to my rant. I hope you have a better day than me. Update. My parents are so kiddish that they won't eat tonight just so that they won't have to cook and have to make me food. Note. To the people who posted recipes and giving methods for me to learn how to cook, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the sentiment and thank you all for the support. Parents shouldn't be like that. Remember, if you have a child, you must teach him what you know and not just scold him. Guys, if you end up liking this video, please consider subscribing, and if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. An entitled mother demands her daughter to be sat on her own wedding because her another daughter is crying over her sister who married faster. Go check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you in my next video.